Welcome again to Seekers of Meaning, the podcast TV arm of Jewish Sacred Aging. I'm your host, Rabbi Richard Address. Thank you very, very much for joining us today in what I promise you will be a very, very interesting and enlightening conversation dealing with what continues to be one of the most, if not the most requested series of workshops that we do out of Jewish Sacred Aging, and that has to do with caregiving, which is in many ways, a new life stage when we're going to explore some of these things with two very, very important and experts in the field, one returnee and one brand new person. So we're very, very happy to welcome back Barry Jacobs, doctor of psychology, therapist here in the greater Philadelphia area, also the go-to caregiving person for the AARP, and Dr. Julia Meyer, also PsyDoc. The authors of the AARP Caregiver Answer book, the AARP Caregiver Answer book, anything you wanted to know in this book. Barry, welcome back. Julia, it's very, very lovely to meet you. I hope you're well and things are good, and congratulations on the book. Let's get right to it. Caregiving, a new life stage. Yes, no, talk to me. I'll start with Julia.
That's a tricky question because people of all ages are caregivers. We might think of it typically as adult children taking care of a parent or a spouse taking care of a spouse, but actually about a quarter of caregivers are millennial or younger. Right. So it's a life stage, but it happens at all stages of life, let's say.
And let's go right to the book, because you include a lot of the books that come out are just saying, how do I deal with my aging parent? But in your chapters and you have discussions, really interesting discussions about the other options that you just alluded to, which I would imagine very few places you can go to get those answers. And it is different. Isn't it, Barry? I mean, taking care of my 95-year-old mom as opposed to my, God forbid, my 18-year-old college student who has a serious issue. There's two different, how different is it?
I mean, there are similarities. I mean, there's overlap with caregiving with all people of all ages, but there are tremendous differences as well. So we know from the Caregiving in the U.S. report, which comes out every 5 years, the last report came out in 2020, and the new report's coming out sometime this year, that about half of all caregivers in this country, and there are about 53 million Americans who are caregivers, are caring for a parent. And that's your kind of quintessential caregiver. Oftentimes they're the sandwich generation caregiver caring for a parent and maybe caring for their own children or grandchildren. And they're being squeezed from the generations above or maybe one or two generations below, and they're very, very stressed. But as you point out, there are many other types of caregiving. So according to the 2020 report, there are about 12% of caregivers are caring for spouses. About 6% are caring for ill or disabled children. What we have found is that different caregiving creates different experiences, creates different stresses on the caregivers. So spousal caregivers tend to have poor overall health, tend to be more stressed, and to have higher rates of depression. Oftentimes because they're older, they tend to have their own chronic illnesses, and they tend to live with the person that they're providing care for, and so they're under greater duress. And so spousal caregivers have it really tough, more so than adult children. And that's not to say that adult children don't have it tough. They do. And Julie and I were both adult children caregivers, but spousal caregivers is really, those are the folks that I think are struggling the most.
We're being told in the popular press or whatever about this tsunami of caregiving. And is it because we're just talking about it more, or because we're living longer? And really the AARP post group is really now 3 generations. The 55-year-old, let's say, person who may have a child being bar mitzvah this weekend, and I'm not making that up, involved with their adult parent who's in their 70s or earlier who may be caring for somebody in their 90s. So, and there are real generational differences, physical differences. How do we even begin, Julia, to understand the complexity of this, which is one of the reasons, obviously, you wrote the book.
That is right. We wrote the book. It's a sort of a roadmap for starters, people who are beginning to be caregivers and just don't know where to begin. And oftentimes, we try to get, when we're talking to people, we get their story. We try to understand what's important to them, what it is they're trying to accomplish. Some caregivers want to do everything all by themselves. We try to dissuade them from that because they could burn out. This could take years. We try to help them understand that it's a long road. They need to learn about whatever illness their family member or loved one has. They need to get a support system in place. They have to think about finances. They have to think about arranging the home so that people are less likely to have falls. There are so many pieces to this that part of the reason we wrote the AARP Caregiver Answer book is so that it's something that people can go to over and over again and get specific answers to whatever they're wondering about. How do I talk to the doctor? How do I get my sibling to help out? It's just such a huge landscape.
Yeah. I mean, to Julie's point, Julie and I had written 2 previous self-help books for caregivers. One called The Emotional Survival Guide for Caregivers and the other AARP Meditations for Caregivers, which are, we're also very proud of those books. But the purpose of the AARP Caregiver Answer book is to be a reference book. It's not a book you're going to sit down and kind of read like a page turner, but it's a book that has lots of information on the specific questions, the most common questions that we have heard caregivers ask in the over 30 years that we've been working with caregivers. And there are about 150 questions in the book. So we cover a lot. We don't cover everything as we can possibly cover everything, but we cover a lot on a whole variety of topics, including how to hire a home health aide, how to put a ramp in a house, how to deal with siblings who don't want to help, how to deal with doctors who are bossy. I mean, all the kinds of things that very frequently come up.
The home health care, we had last month a podcast with a company that just does home health care, and they walked us through, just so many of the challenges, not the least of which are the psychological, psycho-spiritual challenges of doing this, because it's a major life transition. Would it be safe to say that the AARP Caregivers Answer book is a curriculum for caregiving?
Sure. I mean, like Barry said, it doesn't cover absolutely everything, but it gives you a lot of basics. So at least you kind of get an idea of what you're doing and how to do it. And places, it's full of resources too. So you can search for more things if you need further information.
The back end of the book is the resource section. I asked the question because one of the things, given all the stuff that you're writing about and all the statistics and the growth of the number of people who are involved in caregiving, you'll tell me if I'm wrong, is there an actual place for somebody can take a class in caregiving? Is there a caregiving class?
So there are local community centers, senior centers that will sponsor an evidence-based curriculum, a class called something like the Savvy Caregiver or Powerful Tools for Caregivers. Those are the 2 that are best known. They're usually like 4 or 5 session classes that are specifically on caring for someone with dementia. So they're not as broad as what we're covering, but they are classes that if you take, you can learn the lay of the land, and it gives you some tools that will help you do a better job, which is what every caregiver wants to do. They want to do as good a job as they possibly can. And, as you're pointing out, Rabbi, I mean, this is an educational process. People have to learn what they're doing. They have to, so otherwise they're really lost at the beginning, and they need to really devote themselves to reading what's available to get a better sense of what do I need to know and what don't I know that I need to learn, and how do I, again, put things in place. I think that the caregiving is going to go well rather than have things, fall apart at some point.
I want to ask your opinion on something, because when I work with couples or individuals or families who are about to enter this stage, and we'll talk a little bit about the Jewish component, because the Jewish texts are voluminous about this, huge and brilliant. And I'll say, well, what else can I do? I said, here's someone other than making sure you have rest and nutrition and support, and if because you're no good if you get sick. But I would suggest that you make sure that you have a conversation with a financial planner and an elder care attorney, because I was just thinking about a situation from last year where they finally did that and said, "Oh my, I was not aware of all the." Could you just speak to this, Julia, about how important it is to sort of, like, as you're going to enter this life stage, to start gathering all these other types of resources?
Absolutely. We have a couple chapters on these things. We ask families to meet as early as possible before they become a caregiving family, if possible, because that way there's no pressure to discuss finances and planning for the future and what the person who may be the care receiver wants. Do they want to be cared for in their home? Do they want to move in with a particular child of theirs? Where do they want to live? Do they want to be in a warm climate? Like, if you explore all of these things, particularly if there are siblings, you bring everybody in and you try to get a conversation where everyone can get on the same page. Everyone knows what the plan is. We definitely stress that if it's possible to meet with a financial planner, please do that, because then you know what your options are. Can you get into a really fancy CCRC, or do you need to stay in your home and bring caregivers in? How will this be? Can the adult children chip in if necessary? All of those things are so crucial to discuss, and it always goes better when people are not completely stressed out talking about it. So the sooner the better.
Yeah, and what I just to add to what Julie said, people don't like to plan for bad things happening. I mean, we all got to buy car insurance because we don't have a choice, but in general, people don't like to think about bad things happening, so they don't want to plan for them. It's almost like a magical thinking that if you plan for it, it'll make it more likely to happen. So the statistics are not good. Like, only about half of Americans have a last will and testament, and only about a third of them have what's called a living will or an advance directive. And what that means is people often have to deal with some very difficult questions in the worst, as Julie points out, in the worst possible circumstances, when there's been a medical catastrophe or when there's even been a sudden death, and now they're trying to figure out what the financial ramifications of that are, who's going to be affected. And it's far better for families to have conversations well in advance of the need for caregiving. That said, at the early stages of caregiving, especially if there's something like dementia, which is a very slowly moving, slowly progressing disease, there's time to meet with an elder law attorney to talk about getting all the paperwork together, the advance directive, the living will, meet with a financial planner to look at some of the financial issues that really need to be addressed. And the third one I would say is really having a conversation with your loved one's medical professional to understand several things: the diagnosis, the prognosis meaning what's likely to happen with this disease in the future. How likely is it to be cured? How likely is it to be managed? How likely is it to be, unfortunately, life-threatening at some point? And then third, what is the functional impact on the individual of this particular disease? If they have congestive heart failure, it means that they have to change their diet. They can't be eating salt, and if they do, then they're going to have fluid retention, and that's going to very negatively affect their ability to walk and to do other things. So there's lots of information that caregivers need to know right up front from the medical community that will help them kind of get a better context for the care that they're providing.
We're speaking with Barry Jacobs and Julia Meyer, co-authors of the AARP Caregivers Answer Book, on today's edition of Seekers of Meaning. And again, if you'd like to make a comment on the programs or suggestions, just feel free to email me, Rabbi Address at jewishsacredaging.com. We invite you to visit the website, and also the Facebook page and a whole bunch of other things, and all that social media stuff. And if you don't know how to ask your grandchild, and they all speak fluent computer. But anyway, both of you are side docs, and one of the things that is always, we see it from clergy perspective, and we deal with families and individuals, is the psycho-spiritual challenges and changes that take place within a family system as people are caregivers, role reversals, all kinds of things. Could each of you just spend a couple of minutes just reflecting upon the psycho-spiritual changes that take place, especially given the fact that caregiving can last months and sometimes years? Julie, I'll start with you.
Yeah, as a matter of fact, I often see this as the most important thing when it comes to caregiving, because at the end of the day, it's about the relationship with the person you're caring for. It's about your relationship with yourself. It's about your relationship with your own morality and spirituality. And a lot of times what keeps caregivers going is their mission, is that feeling of, maybe my dad was a difficult person when I was a kid, and now here I am taking care of him, but I'm a good person and I am doing the right thing. And maybe I can even improve our relationship now that I'm an adult. I may be the adult if he has dementia or something. And I have some impact on making this more meaningful. So a lot of times, we talk to people about being mindful in the moment of how important an opportunity caregiving can be. As difficult as it is, as frustrating, it's also an opportunity to find meaning and to build relationship with the care receiver, with siblings, with whoever else is involved in the picture, that can be transformative. I mean, I've certainly had people talk to me about how, they had a difficult relationship with their mom. They were never close. And then they became her caregiver. And in that process, the mom grew to respect her adult daughter more, that kind of thing. It's so meaningful. And then even after the care receiver does pass away, the caregiver gets to carry that and have that meaningful experience, that improved relationship with their mother or whoever. That is so core to what we want people to find through caregiving.
Yeah. Bar?
I'll just add the caregiver's relationship with God. If they have a strong faith, we see that sometimes tested by caregiving, sometimes strengthened by caregiving, and I'm sure you see this as well, Rabbi. What we've seen people who are angry at God for, say, causing their loved one to have a stroke or to develop dementia or Parkinson's disease, when they felt that is just simply unjust because their family member was a good person, a devout person, and maybe they themselves are a good and devout person, and they didn't deserve to have this visited upon them. And sometimes that means that people become disaffected from their faith and from their religious observance. But on the other hand, we also see people who turn toward their religious practice because it becomes a way for them to ground themselves, for them to kind of reinforce those values that Julie was talking about, the morality and the sense of, the importance, sense of duty, and also the sense of possibility and spiritual transformation that could occur through this. So, I think, caregiving is sort of a cliche, but it's like a crucible in which lots of good things could happen. All that said, it's not to take away from how stressful it is. It's also it's an extremely stressful passage in the lives of family.
Oh, yes. Look, it's in the Jewish terms, it's the fifth commandment. And we've seen, as you were alluding to, moments of reconciliation of parents and adult children who were estranged. And because of this, when you drive constantly, or when you help your parent toilet, or when you see them at their most vulnerable and you understand there were all reversals and the changes and the psychological aspect of saying, is this me X numbers of years? And if it is, who's going to do this for me? These are hugely spiritual moments, hugely spiritual moments. The sad thing about it is that not enough synagogues or religious institutions really take the time to talk to their own people about their own religious traditions, texts that inform how to answer these moments. Because in Judaism, they're all there. But they are profoundly spiritual moments. You have in the book 9 roles caregivers play: companion, attendant, driver, administrator, care manager, technical interpreter, advocate, healthcare provider, and one that I that's the one I wanted to ask you guys about: cheerleader coach. Okay, rah rah rah. Sis, what? Okay, Barry, cheerleader coach. What are these 9? What is that?
Well, so I took care of my mom. Actually, Julie and I both took care of my mom toward the end of her life when she had vascular dementia. And I would say the cheerleader part of it would be, Mom, you can do this. Come on. I mean, let's get you up out of bed. We got to get to the doctors by 11 o'clock. You can get up now. I'll help you. But it's that encouragement, that constant encouragement that we would give somebody for whom maybe even some simple things are a struggle. And the coaching part may be, your mom, you're having trouble swallowing, so I'm going to watch you swallow the pill, and you need to tuck your chin when you swallow because you'll be less likely to gag. And so, Mom didn't always like to be coached, frankly. Mom liked to be the coach. She didn't like to be coached.
No,
but the fact is, we caregivers do a lot of that. They do a lot of cajoling. They do a lot of attaboys, like, you can do this, come on. And that's part of the role.
I just when I looked at those things, having done that with my mom, who did not like to be coached at all. I said, well, yeah, I did that. I was certainly the driver because I'm an only. When I got to the cheerleading and coach, I literally started to giggle, and I was thinking, oh yeah, right. I would say, come on, Mom, you just don't talk to me like that,
We get it. My mom was the worst at accepting help. So maybe your mom was worse, I should say.
Oh, no. It may have been generational. Juliet, when my caregiving role is over, either because the person has gotten well or the person has died, and this had been a major component of my identity, and now that is over, you run across people who just don't know what to do. They're lost. They've lost that raison d'etre.
All the time.
Oh,
All the time. Because caregiving is so consuming, and depending on who they're caring for, if it's a spouse, if it's a parent, particularly a beloved parent, it's so meaningful and it becomes so defining, and you often, statistically anyway, goes on for years. So when it's over, there's probably grief if the person has passed away, and there's also relief. But there's also this identity question of, what do I do now? That was the most meaningful thing I've ever done in my life. What am I going to do now? And so we try to help people figure out what will be meaningful. Sometimes caregivers go on and do more caregiving because it was so meaningful. Sometimes all they want is never to do caregiving again, which is fine too. But we try to figure out with them, what did they miss? What is it that they longed for while they were doing the caregiving and they didn't have time for it? But they do often have to rebuild. Sometimes their social life, sometimes good friends sort of disappeared after year 3 or something. And so they have to find a new landing place, and it can take a while. And I always tell people, try to be patient with yourself. You've been through a lot, and you have a lot of grief. You might even have some trauma. And it's, maybe it could even be a joy to try to figure out, what do I do next?
In the book and in the literature, there's lots of talk about the stress, caregiver stress syndrome and stuff like that. you also address in the book one of the chief reasons for that caregiver stress, and that's mom's in Boca, I'm in Wynwood, in Philly. I can't get down there. How do I manage this long distance? The whole long distance caregiver, because a lot of adult children and families are separated from people needing care. Walk me through how you address that, Barry, in the book.
Well, so there's no one answer, obviously, but so again, I'm going to use my mom as an example. And my stepfather, who has Alzheimer's disease, they live in Boca, a little further north. They live in Boynton Beach. So,
Boynton Beach.
Yeah. So my stepfather's Alzheimer's disease was quite bad. My mother was caring for him. They were both struggling, and we would go down. Right, we would go down a couple times a year to try to help, but as it became more evident that they were having greater difficulties, we were trying to urge them to bring more help into the home. That didn't really work very well. And ultimately, we brought them back north, kicking and screaming, but they came north, and they lived in an apartment about a mile from us. But it's a very difficult role to play. Sometimes what people do is they will hire a geriatric care manager, or also called an aging life care manager, who's in that area where the parent is, because that person knows the resources in that area and can help guide care better than someone who lives 1,000 miles can. And so that person becomes a kind of go-between between the adult child and the parent. Sometimes it's I hate to say this, but sometimes things have to get worse before they get better. I recall a story where, again, somebody's parent was in Florida. The parent said, I'm fine. Until the day that the son learned that the parents' electricity had been shut off. And the electricity had been shut off because they had been developing dementia and didn't pay their bill for like 4 or 5 months. And so we have to keep tabs on from a long distance. We can't be intrusive from a long distance because that doesn't generally work very well. But we have to do the best we can.
I know what I guess you call reverse migration, and moving loved ones back, which in itself can be traumatic. Because I remember I've talked to enough families and say, well, we've been down in Boynton for 25 years. There's nobody left back home. And so you have your own life to live. Where are you going to put me? I'm going to be all alone. At least down here, I have a couple of friends. But as you said, these are all part of the stressors and the costs, which is again, another reason why it's great. I think it's your chapter 10 that has the chapter on the costs of caregiving, which are getting larger, more, and the fear of when you're caring for an older adult, of them outliving their money, which happened to my mom. And that's it's another stressor. How am I going to do this? Where am I going to do this with? And who am I going to do this with? There's a part of our tradition that talks about truth telling. You're a caregiver. You love the person you're caring for. You're invested with them in so many different ways. How do you manage telling the truth?
You're looking at me, Julie.
The truth about their financial situation.
The truth.
Because we had to do that.
Yeah, the truth about their financial situation, or the truth about the fact that, the arsenal of technology has been exhausted. We now have to make some very serious decisions.
It's a very tough conversation. You do it lovingly as you can, like everything. I always think when you're thinking about the care receiver, you want to have as much compassion as possible. Sometimes they make you angry and frustrated. And even then, you want to take that step back and have compassion. So if you're talking about the fact that they've run out of money, which my in-laws did, and we had to help them out, you do it in the kindest way you can. And you do it saying, I'm on your team. We're going to figure this out together. You may have run out of money and outlived your finances, and people are living longer, and that's happening more. but we're here to support you. We want to do this with you. We're not going to take over. We want to be partners. I think if even when you're talking to a loved one about the fact that whatever the Parkinson's that they have is going to lead to their demise, you still, we talk about it lovingly. I'm going to be here with you, as much as possible. I'm going to hold your hand. I'm going to walk with you. I think that's the only way you can really deal with these kinds of extremely difficult conversations.
Yeah, and I just add in our family situation, our children were still teenagers when we moved. My mom and stepfather were up from Florida, and so that was like a bonus, right? They were going to be taken care of, which they weren't so keen about being taken care of, but they were going to have more contact with their grandchildren, and that meant a lot to them. And frankly, through most of our children's lives, their grandparents were living in Florida. They did not know each other very well. And now this was an opportunity for the grandparent and grandchild to really get to know one another because they were seeing each other all the time. And so it's a little something. It's not, there's a lot of tough parts of this about bringing someone up that hasn't really endured winter in a long time. And now they're going to have to deal with the cold weather or deal with ice. So,
but as you will find out, that relationship of grandparent to grandchild is very therapeutic, and it's magical. It is magical. It's another story. Another story for another time. The combating, and Julia mentioned this, talking to people and making sure in any way that, because getting older and frail with illness, the issue of being alone, of loneliness, of being isolated, sometimes even being talked down to, what some people call the third person invisible, that is very prevalent because ultimately you're dealing with the ultimate aloneness, especially in terminal cases. So that presence, that's another spiritual component of caregiving. We live in New Jersey, you live across the river. So we have medical aid in dying. And I've been involved with about 3 cases with this. And the people have done podcasts for us last year. Where do you, as therapists, as authors of this book, obviously this is coming up, because there are 10 jurisdictions in the United States where this is legal. What advice, how do you handle this as one of the questions that come up in the answer book? Well, truthfully, we live in Pennsylvania where medical aid in dying is not available, legal, right?
And we haven't dealt with it very much. Certainly, the medical aid in dying process is a legal process with lots of stringent measures to ensure that people are not ending their lives without cause. And so we do talk with folks about oftentimes about not extending life with care, which is a little different version of this. But for instance, people who may decide that a parent who has late stage dementia and has pneumonia, that they're not going to treat that pneumonia with antibiotics. They're just going to let the pneumonia take its course and eventually take that person's life because they decide that is really what is the most loving thing that can be done for them.
I've had many conversations with mostly clients of mine, but also just anyone who knows that we write these books about quality of life. So, palliative care, I have a client whose mother has dementia and he's so worried, should I take her to the doctor because she has, a sore on her arm, or should we just not take her to the doctor? And what I always say, I don't know the answer to that specific question, but what I always say is, imagine yourself in her shoes. Is the quality of life that you have good enough to continue on? Would you want to keep living this way? Very diminished, not remembering anything, not being able to clean herself. Just very limited. would you want to extend that if it were you? And that helps people see what path they might take more empathically. Like, because usually people judge themselves. Like, I know I have to do everything I can for my mom. Well, what does that really mean? Everything you can. What you want to do is give her the most peaceful end of life that you can.
Yeah. What makes this infinitely more complicated is when it's in a family context, when you have multiple siblings who may have different views, and then there may be some conflict among them about how best to help a parent in this situation. That's why it's all the more important that the parent has indicated their desires early on in an advance directive letting will, so that the children don't have to debate among themselves like what's best for mom right now.
Correct. And in the AARP Caregivers Answer book, you look at these scenarios of siblings and issues. And in Judaism, we have this concept of stewardship where if even if I as an adult child disagree with the wishes of my parent, but those wishes were expressed in good health and understanding the implications, I'm obligated to adhere to the wishes of my parent, even though I may personally disagree with it. Which is all the more reason to have these huge conversations, as you both say, and write about and have written about way before the crisis hits. Last question before we have to go, because we're running out of time. I'll start with Julia. One piece of advice. Somebody may be watching this or listening to this who is about to enter this life stage. What's the one piece of advice that you would give them?
One, I have a handful, but the first one,
other than read the book,
the first one is make sure you have a community, and use that community thoughtfully. If you are a member of a synagogue or a religious institution, let your people know that this is happening, that you're going to need their support, and whatever systems are in place in that community, make use of them. Do not be afraid to ask. Do not be afraid to receive.
Thank you. Bar?
I would say that we want people to be kind to themselves, that oftentimes caregivers are very self-critical because they feel like such a heavy weight of responsibility that if they mess up, if they don't do something right, their parent falls or the parent doesn't get the medication on time, the parent misses an appointment, or the parent gets sick, that the adult child caregiver feels horrendous guilt. And the fact is, this is hard, and we're all human, and you are going to make mistakes. And the idea here is most people don't need a perfect caregiver. They need a good enough caregiver. And when caregivers instead hold themselves to too high a standard and then beat themselves up, they don't do themselves any favors. And so more than anything, we want people to be compassionate, not just towards the person receiving care, but also toward themselves.
Yeah, in a lot of ways, this is about love. And what I've also told families, don't forget your sense of humor.
Definitely.
Because it really will come in handy every once in a while. Barry Jacobs, Julia Meyer, the authors of the AARP Caregivers Answer book, Guildford Press Publishing, will be available at the usual suspects, I would imagine, including the great God Amazon. And thank you very, very much. Continued success. Good luck with the book. Good luck with the family. And just enjoy everything. Just savor every moment. You'll love it. So
Thank you so much.
Thank you. To all of you, thank you very, very much for joining us on today's edition of The Seekers of Meaning, the podcast TV arm of Jewish Sacred Aging. We very, very much appreciate your time. Again, if you'd like to talk to us, make a suggestion, have an idea, just feel free to email me at rabbiaddress@jewishsacredaging.com. And on the website, if you'd like to support our work, again, don't forget there's a very, very conveniently located donate button on the jewishsacredaging.com website. It's tax-free donation. We do appreciate it. Seekers of Meaning is produced at the Broadcast Center of Lubetkin Media Company in Cherry Hill, New Jersey. And a big super shout out to our super producer, Steve Lubetkin. Until we see each other again on the next Seekers of Meaning, take care of yourself, stay healthy, stay well, and most of all, be kind to one another. Shalom.